The wind swept across the open plain like a quiet sigh, carrying dust and dry grass through the late afternoon light. The wagon stood still near the dirt road, one wheel broken, its canvas torn and flapping softly. Beside it sat a small child, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if that was the only way to keep the world from taking more away. Her hair was tangled, her dress faded and stained with days of travel and tears. She did not cry anymore. She had already cried until there were no tears left. Now she only waited, not knowing for what, not knowing for whom. The rancher saw the wagon first. He was riding back from town, the sun low behind him, his horse moving at a steady, tired pace. He had not planned to take this road, but something pulled him toward it that day, something quiet and insistent. When he noticed the broken wagon, he slowed, scanning for signs of trouble. Then he saw her. A child. Alone. He dismounted slowly, careful not to startle her. His boots crunched softly on the dirt as he stepped closer. The girl lifted her eyes, wide and hollow, filled with a fear too old for her young face. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice rough from years of silence but careful, kind. "Where's your family?" She did not answer. He crouched down to her level, noticing how thin her arms were, how her hands shook even though the air was warm. There were marks on the wagon, signs that it had once carried more than one person. A small blanket lay folded inside. A tin cup rested near the wheel. Someone had been here. Someone had left. "My name's Samuel," he said after a moment. "I won't hurt you." Her lips parted slightly. "Mama and Papa," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. Samuel's chest tightened. He had heard that tone before, in himself, years ago, when he stood alone at a grave with no one to hold his hand. "What happened?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Mama got sick. Papa went to find help. He told me to stay." "How long have you been waiting?" Samuel asked. She shrugged. "The sun went down. And came up again. And then again. 2 days. Maybe more." Samuel stood slowly, looking down the road in both directions. There were no tracks fresh enough to follow, no signs of another wagon. He already knew the truth, even before she said, "Papa never came back." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a piece of bread, holding it out to her without moving closer. "Are you hungry?" She stared at it as if it were a dream. Slowly, cautiously, she took it and ate with small, careful bites, as though afraid it might disappear. Samuel watched her, something shifting deep inside him. His ranch house was quiet. Too quiet. It had been that way since his wife passed and the laughter that once filled those walls faded into memory. He had told himself he was content with solitude, that loneliness was easier than loss. But looking at the child beside the broken wagon, he realized loneliness had been lying to him. "Do you have a name?" he asked. "Clara," she said. "Well, Clara," Samuel said, offering his hand, rough and weathered but steady. "You don't have to stay here anymore." She looked at his hand, then up at his face. "Where would I go?" He swallowed, feeling the weight of the words before he spoke them. Words he had not planned, words that came from somewhere deeper than thought. "With me," he said. "I'll be your father." Her breath caught. "You mean, forever?" she asked. "As long as you need," he replied. Clara hesitated only a moment before placing her small hand into his. It fit there, perfectly, as though it had always belonged. The ride to the ranch was quiet. Clara leaned against him, exhausted, asleep before they reached the gate. Samuel carried her inside, laying her gently on the bed that once belonged to his wife. That night, as the fire crackled low and the house breathed again with life, Samuel sat at the table long after the candles burned down, listening to the sound of a child sleeping under his roof. He had not realized how much he missed that sound. The days that followed were not easy. Clara woke from nightmares, calling for parents who would never answer. She flinched at loud noises and hoarded food under her pillow. Samuel learned patience in new ways, speaking softly, moving slowly, letting trust grow like a fragile seed. He learned how to braid hair badly, how to cook meals that were more than beans and bread, how to smile again. The town noticed. "Where'd the girl come from?" they asked. Samuel told the story simply. Some nodded with approval. Others whispered doubts. He ignored them all. When winter came early and hard, Clara fell sick with fever. Samuel stayed by her bed for 3 nights, holding her hand just as he had found her holding herself beside the wagon. He prayed in a way he had not prayed since he buried his wife, promising anything, offering everything. Clara lived. Years passed. The ranch changed. Laughter echoed where silence once ruled. Drawings hung on the walls. Footsteps followed Samuel wherever he went. Clara learned to ride, to help with chores, to read by the firelight. She called him Papa one day without thinking, and he had to turn away so she would not see the tears in his eyes. When Clara was 10, a stranger came to the ranch. He was thin, worn, his eyes heavy with regret. "I'm looking for my daughter," the man said. "Her name is Clara." Samuel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Clara stood behind him, clutching his coat. The man told his story. He had gone for help. He had been injured, robbed, left for dead. By the time he recovered, the wagon was gone. He had searched for years. Samuel listened in silence. When the man finished, Clara stepped forward. "I waited," she said quietly. "I waited until I thought my heart would break." "I'm sorry," the man whispered. She looked back at Samuel, then at the ranch behind her, the home she had grown into, the father who had chosen her when no one else had been there. "I have a father," she said gently. "He's right here." The man wept, and Samuel felt no anger, only sorrow for what might have been. They gave the man food, money, kindness. He left knowing his child was loved. That night, Clara hugged Samuel tighter than ever. "You won't leave, will you?" she asked. "Never," he said. Years later, when Samuel grew old and slow, Clara cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her. She married, built a life, but never left the ranch behind. When Samuel passed peacefully in his sleep, Clara held his hand until the end. On his grave, she placed a small wooden carving of a wagon wheel. Because beside a broken wagon, a lonely rancher had taken a child's hand and said, "I'll be your father." And in doing so, he saved them both.